Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about base training. Base training is something that we've all heard about, we've all seen and read about, but it's still quite a vague topic for some, and I firmly believe that a lot of people consider their base training as just the training they do to stay generally fit throughout the winter when they don't have any races coming up. When in actual fact, base training could potentially be the most important part of your entire annual plan. Before I go into all the ins and outs of base training, please make sure to subscribe and hit the little bell notification down below so you don't miss out on any future videos. I'm also going to leave a few links to the blog where I go into a few areas of base training that you might find useful and might benefit you in your training. Base training is simply a phase of periodization, and periodization simply is a way to structure your overall annual training plan so that you know what you're doing, when you're doing it, and why you're doing it. And all that does is keeps you on track to make sure that you're actually working towards your goals and the races you're trying to prepare for. The base phase is simply your main preparation phase. So this is where you develop all the underlying fitness that you're going to need for the type of event you're doing, which might be dictated by event type, or event distance, or event duration. But for most people, this is going to be working on the aerobic system and developing all the little pieces of that system. The off season is the best time to work on your base training because you don't have to worry about racing. When you have a lot of races that you're worried about, you're going to prioritize those and avoid certain training in order to stay fresh and performing well. And a lot of the processes you need to do in your off season or during the base phase are the types of training that won't necessarily carry over to performance immediately. And with all the athletes I've worked with, it is really essential that you're building from season to season, but the time that you need to put into certain training types isn't always available during competition. And this is where the base phase is so important. So things like body composition changes or a very slow, easy aerobic style training or strength training are things that are very hard to do when you have a lot of competitions around. So the off season is the best time to do this, where you can actually dedicate time to making the changes you want without having to worry about your performance. When you're doing base training, you're going to want to work mostly on your aerobic system, as this usually builds the base off which you're going to build everything else for the rest of your season. So to work the aerobic system and to get adaptations there, you're going to be looking for structural changes, things like developments in the heart muscle, the lungs, the circulatory system, and the mitochondrial density in the muscle. These are the sorts of things that are going to improve your aerobic capacity. Now, these are also the types of things that require quite a lot of large volumes of training to develop, and they do take time because they are actual structural changes in most cases. In order to do this, you're going to need to build up volume of your low intensity work, your zone 2 work, over a long period of time, and it's going to need to be slow, steady and progressive so that you don't get burnt out or you don't get too fatigued. One of the main concerns you might have when you're going through your base phase is how much intensity work do you need to do? And it's a very good question. You don't need to do a huge amount of high intensity work when you're doing your base phase, but you can't drop it altogether. You won't require a huge amount of training to maintain the higher end of your energy systems. And if you do a little bit, if you just sprinkle it in, it actually helps the energy systems collaborate together and work together so you can actually, produce great power but also clear lactate at the same time. If you were to do too much high intensity work, you'll start developing the glycolytic system. You'll start to produce more lactate. And while this might show a very short, quick response to training and give you good benefits, it's not really working on the aerobic end, which is going to stand to you a lot more later on in racing. So it is important that you follow the 80-20 principle in the base phase, which is 80% easy, 20% hard. And if you follow this ratio of easy work to hard work, you should go okay and you should get the results you're looking for. Time constraints are quite often a challenge in the off season where you want to accumulate large volumes of training, but you just don't have the time. This doesn't mean that you should move on to high intensity interval training because it's shorter, because it's just going to be working on a different system. You're still worthwhile working on the intensity that's going to develop the aerobic system. And even if you progress it a little bit year to year, you're still building on what you've done before. And that actually overall gives you progress from year to year and season to season. You can always add in the high intensity stuff closer to racing when it'll have a little bit more of a positive effect, and you'll generally have a much better outcome going with that approach. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope it's cleared up a little bit more around what base training is and how to get the most out of it. If you have any more questions, just leave them in the comments below, and please make sure to check out those links I've put in the below as well, because they will go into things in a little bit more detail and give you a few more ideas of training sessions and things that you might be able to implement into your own base training to give you better results. Until next time, thanks again for joining.